The street fell silent, except for the distant hum of crickets and the click of handcuffs. Neighbors stepped forward cautiously, phones raised, documenting the fall of the tyrant who'd ruled them for 8 years. Nathan knelt beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "It's over, Dad." I looked at the garden, Lisa's garden, muddy, trampled, but somehow still alive. The basil had survived. It was bent, but unbroken. I smiled for the first time in weeks. "No, son," I said quietly. "It's just beginning." "Get off my property, Karen!" I shouted as flashing red and blue lights bounced off the white panels of my porch. Karen stood at the end of my driveway, phone in hand, lips painted in that perfect, poisonous red she always wore when she was about to ruin someone's day. "Robert Thompson is refusing to comply," she yelled, loud enough for the 5 police officers surrounding my yard to hear. The absurdity hit me like a slap. Shed called the cops on me for moving out of my own damn house. One of the younger officers hesitated, hand resting near his holster. "Sir, we just need to verify what's going on," he said, glancing at Karen like she was the mayor. I raised my hands, forcing a calm smile. "What's going on?" I replied. "Is that this woman thinks she owns the entire neighborhood." Karen's sunglasses flashed under the siren lights. "Don't get dramatic, Robert. You can't move out without HOA authorization." The cop's brow furrowed. "Is that a thing?" Karen nodded confidently. "It is, in Willowbrook." The absurdity of that statement hung in the humid night air. My pulse pounded. I wanted to laugh, but the anger in my chest was too raw. I wasn't breaking the law. I was escaping her tyranny. And the worst part? Everyone watching knew it. Neighbors stood in their doorways, phones recording, their faces a mix of fascination and fear. That's when the door of the 5th patrol car opened. A tall figure stepped out, calm and silent. My son, Nathan. Off duty, still in jeans and a badge on his belt. Karen's jaw tightened the second she saw him. She didn't know who Shed just picked a fight with. 6 weeks earlier, my life had been peaceful, simple, quiet, exactly what Lisa wanted for me. I'd wake before dawn, walk barefoot through the dew, and check on the basil plant Shed left behind. It was still alive 3 years after cancer took her from us. Sometimes, if the wind hit just right, I swore I could still hear her laugh between the leaves. She'd been a nurse who believed food could heal the soul. Before she passed, she made me promise to keep growing good, clean things. So when Street Devant, Mary's hospital, called offering me a contract to supply all their organic vegetables, I thought it was her way of guiding me forward from heaven. That morning, I stood in the backyard, sunlight catching on the dew-covered leaves, and whispered, "We did it, Lisa. It felt right," until I hammered the "for sale" sign into my front lawn, because the moment that sign hit the ground, she appeared. Karen Whitmore, 52, perfectly ironed yoga pants, the kind of woman who exercised her power more than her body. She moved like she owned the air itself. "Robert," she said in that sugary voice that meant danger was coming, "surely you're not thinking of leaving our beautiful community?" I told her about the hospital deal, about expanding Lisa's dream. She smiled, but her eyes turned cold. "Moving can be complicated," she said softly, "especially with our HOA regulations. I do hope you've reviewed Section 12 about property transfers." I knew that tone. It was the same one Shed used 2 years earlier when Shed tried to ban vegetable gardens from front yards. Unsightly, she called them. I'd taken her to court and won. Since then, it'd been public enemy number 1 in her picture-perfect world. That afternoon, I watched from the window as she stood across the street, glaring at my FOR sale sign like it was graffiti on her front gate. By the next morning, a bright orange violation notice appeared on my door. Parking a commercial vehicle for more than 2 hours. Fine, $500. My delivery truck was parked in my own driveway. No one had ever enforced that rule before. Karen showed up to collect the fine personally, her perfume arriving 3 seconds before her words. "This is just the beginning, Robert," she hissed, pretending to adjust her sunglasses.
I always
"Ill,
win.
make sure you never leave Willowbrook." Her voice dropped, soft but venomous. "You think you can abandon your responsibilities to this community? Think again. I know people, important people." Then she smiled, the kind of smile that could curdle milk, and walked away. 2 days later, my potential buyer backed out. Concerns about the property's reputation, the agent told me. When I demanded an explanation, she forwarded me an email Karen had blasted to every homeowner in Willowbrook. The subject line read, "Community alert. Suspicious activity at 118 Maple. Karen accused me of hiding debts, breaking rules, and defrauding the HOA. 47 supposed violations, complete with photoshopped evidence." Reading it, I felt that rare kind of anger that burns cold. She wasn't just ruining a sale, she was desecrating Lisa's dream. I almost stormed across the street that night. Almost. But then I remembered Lisa's final words. "Promise me you'll never fight with fists or fury. Fight with wisdom and patience." So I sat down at my desk and started documenting. Every threat, every false claim, every whisper of harassment. I didn't know it yet, but that decision to fight smart would save my life. The next morning, my phone rang. The moving company I'd hired sounded terrified. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but your HOA president called us. She says we need special permits to operate in Willowbrook. She threatened to sue us for trespassing. I tried to reason with them, explain it was a bluff, but it didn't matter. They canceled." Just like that. 5 years of life to pack, and no one brave enough to help. I was still processing it when someone knocked softly on my back door. Maria Rodriguez stood there, her face pale, eyes darting nervously. Flour dusted her dark hair, shed come straight from her bakery. "Robert, we need to talk," she whispered. "Not here. Karen has Mike watching your house." My stomach dropped. Mike Stevens, the so-called HOA security guard. I'd seen him, always lurking in that beat-up white van, camera in hand, pretending to enforce community standards. A man who looked like trouble even when standing still. Maria led me to her car, parked 2 streets over. Inside, she opened a worn notebook filled with scribbled dates and printed photos. "You're not her first target," she said quietly. "Karen's done this before. 3 families in the past 3 years, forced out, bankrupted, then their homes sold cheap to her brother under fake LLCs. My mouth went dry. She flipped a page. She even threatened me when I refused to vote her way on the HOA board, said she'd burn my bakery down. Mariah's husband was a cop, but even he couldn't protect her without evidence. That notebook was our weapon. We decided to bait her. I'd act like I was still trying to move, push her to make a mistake, while Maria recorded everything. And Karen took the bait faster than I could have imagined. The very next day, a tow truck showed up to haul away my delivery van. HOA violation, the driver said. But when he saw my name, he burst out laughing. "Mr. Thompson? You're the guy who sells those organic veggies at the farmer's market. My wife swears they saved her health." He winked, unhooked the truck, and drove off. Karen's face turned the color of spoiled wine as she screamed, "You'll regret this!" That evening, she called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, but Maria was. Karen ranted like a dictator on a caffeine high. Within minutes, she passed a new temporary regulation. No homeowner could move out within 90 days of listing their property. Illegal, absurd, but everyone on her puppet board nodded along. Maria secretly live-streamed the whole thing. 500 people watched as Karen shouted, spat, and even admitted she was targeting me. "Nobody leaves Willowbrook without my permission," she screamed. The internet erupted. "Is this even legal?" One comment read. "Someone call the cops," wrote another. Then someone typed, "Is that a knife in her purse?" Maria zoomed in, and sure enough, there it was, a switchblade-shaped outline in Karen's designer handbag. The crowd turned on her instantly. She lunged for Maria's phone, but Maria backed away, still filming. "Turn that off!" Karen shrieked. "You're violating HOA privacy rules!" The irony was almost poetic. Within hours, the clip went viral across local Facebook groups. The next morning, I woke to find my garden vandalized, traitor spray painted across the soil, plants torn from their roots. My heart clenched. Lisa's basil was gone. Security footage showed Mike doing it, with Karen standing nearby, directing him like a movie director gone mad. And on my doorstep, a single red rose with a note. "This is what happens to people who betray the community." I stared at it until my hands shook. Then I swept the debris, took a deep breath, and told myself what Lisa would have said: grow again. That evening, Maria texted me, "Robert, I found something. Come alone." I drove to her bakery after dark. The smell of fresh bread didn't hide the tension. On the counter lay a spread of bank records, receipts, and fake invoices, all traced to Karen. "She's been stealing from the HOA," Maria said, eyes fierce. "Over $150,000. I stared at the papers. The woman who fined me for parking was embezzling community money to buy real estate. "We're going to end her reign," I said quietly, "but we do it smart." And that's how the war for Willowbrook began. A farmer, a baker, and the ghost of a nurse versus the self-proclaimed queen of the suburbs. What we didn't know yet was that Karen had allies in places we couldn't imagine, and that the fight for justice was about to turn into something much darker. 3 nights after the garden vandalism, I couldn't sleep. The air felt thick, heavy with something unseen. From my porch, the neighborhood looked normal, quiet lawns, porch lights glowing like false security, but I knew better. Karen was planning her next move, and Mariah's evidence had just made us dangerous to her. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by printouts, emails, photos, fake invoices, all proving what Maria had uncovered. Karen had been siphoning HOA funds for years through fake maintenance companies. Landscaping projects billed but never done, sidewalk repairs paid for twice, security upgrades that existed only on paper. Shed funneled the money into her brother's shell corporations, buying homes from families Shed bullied out. It was fraud disguised as community service. Mariah's hands trembled as she pointed at the numbers. She's stolen over $150,000, maybe more. Her brother buys the homes under different LLCs, then flips them for profit. It's organized crime, Robert. Her voice broke slightly. And if she finds out we know, she won't stop at vandalism. I nodded, a cold determination settling over me. Then we make her expose herself. We let her think she's winning. The next morning, I started my day as if nothing had changed. I watered what was left of my garden, fixed broken trellises, smiled at the few neighbors still brave enough to wave. But behind the calm, I was recording everything. Every car that slowed in front of my house. Every sound after midnight. Every text Karen sent to the community board. The deeper I looked, the more twisted it became. Shed turned Willowbrook into her private fiefdom, manipulating fines, rewriting rules, and silencing anyone who questioned her authority. Then came the health inspector. Again. Same guy as before, but this time he looked furious. "Mr. Thompson," he said, lowering his clipboard. "Someone sent an anonymous tip claiming your vegetables tested positive for E. coli. He handed me the report. It was laughable, photoshopped images of my produce beside sewage runoff. This is harassment," he said flatly. "And I'm reporting whoever filed this." Then he softened, lowering his voice. "By the way, my wife loved the tomatoes. Do you still have some left?" That brief flicker of human kindness nearly broke me. While Karen's lies spread like poison ivy, small acts of decency kept me afloat. But that same night, I learned just how far Shed go. Around 10 p.m., the lights flickered, then died. The air conditioning cut out, the irrigation system went silent. Total blackout. Within minutes, my plants began to wither under the late summer heat. I stepped outside and saw a white van parked by the HOA office, Mike Stevens, leaning on the hood, grinning like a man who'd just committed a small murder. The next morning, I confronted the utility company. Emergency maintenance, they said, authorized by your HOA president. My stomach twisted. Shed actually used her fake maintenance company to cut off my utilities. I spent the day hauling water from store-bought jugs, watching thousands of dollars of crops wither in front of me. Each dying plant felt like losing another piece of Lisa. But as I poured that last gallon into the soil, I whispered to her, "They can kill the plants, Lisa. They can't kill the promise." By midweek, the financial pressure began to close in. The hospital contract hung by a thread. The procurement officer left voicemails filled with polite panic. My regular market customers started pulling back, some scared by the rumors Karen spread, others too tired of her harassment to get involved. My home felt like a prison. Every window watched. Every sound suspect. At night, I could see Mike's van idling at the corner, the glow of his cigarette pulsing like a metronome of intimidation. That Friday, Maria called. "She's losing control," she whispered. "I heard her screaming at the board members this morning. She's terrified. Well, expose her." Mariah's courage had grown into something unbreakable. Shed started recording Karen's every phone call, every order she barked during meetings, and when she invited me to the next HOA assembly, I didn't hesitate. I knew it was time to face her in public. The meeting took place in the community center, a place that used to host bake sales and Christmas parties. That night, it felt more like a courtroom. Karen stood at the podium in a designer blazer, smiling like a queen, addressing her subjects. "We must protect our property values," she declared. Effective immediately, I'm implementing new safety regulations. The list was absurd. Increased fines, stricter noise rules, mandatory approval for all property sales. Maria stood, her voice calm but strong. "You can't do that without a board vote." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Sit down, Maria. Or should I remind everyone about your unlicensed bakery operation?" The room went silent. Maria didn't flinch. Actually, it'd like to remind everyone of something else. She held up her phone and began reading from her notes. Over $150,000 missing from HOA funds. Fake maintenance companies, illegal liens, homeowners forced into foreclosure, Karen's mask cracked. "Lies!" she shrieked. "These are fabrications!" But the residents were already murmuring, whispering names, connecting dots. For the first time, people were questioning her authority. "You think you're saving this community?" Maria continued. "You're destroying it." The meeting descended into chaos. Karen grabbed the microphone, her voice rising to a pitch of desperation. "They're conspiring against me! Robert Thompson is behind this!" But the floodgates had opened. Neighbors who'd been silent for years stood up to tell their own stories. Threats, fines, intimidation. It was no longer about me or Maria. It was everyone versus her. When the shouting reached its peak, Karen stormed out, phone pressed to her ear. "Mike," she hissed into it. "Plan B." I didn't know what that meant, but Maria did. She looked terrified. "Robert," she said, "you need to watch your back." By dawn, Plan B was in motion. Mike had parked his van directly across my driveway, blocking my truck. Head set up folding chairs, cameras, and even a fake security sign that read, "Authorized HOA Surveillance Zone." When I confronted him, he grinned. "Misses." "Whitmore hired me to monitor suspicious activity," he said. "And buddy, everything you do looks suspicious." His breath reeked of alcohol. His badge, a laminated piece of paper with Karen's signature, fluttered in the breeze. My phone buzzed. "Nathan, Dad, I saw the live stream from the meeting. You need to file a report." I explained about Karen's ties to local police, her brother-in-law, the dispatch supervisor, who made complaints disappear. "Then come stay with me," Nathan said, "but I couldn't leave." "Your mother wouldn't have run," I told him. "Neither will I." That night, exhaustion hit me like a wave. I sat at the kitchen table and began writing to Lisa again, like I always did when the world became too much. "Your garden is dying, my love," I wrote, "but I'm not giving up. You said to fight with patience. I'm trying, but it's getting harder. She's turned our dream into a battlefield." The letter steadied me. It reminded me why I was still here, because love, even when buried under rage and grief, is stronger than fear. As I sealed the letter, a flash went off outside. Mike's camera. He was photographing me through the window, probably hoping to fabricate another violation. I forced a smile and waved, let him think I was unbothered. But inside, the anger coiled tighter, a spring waiting to snap. The following morning, the health inspector returned again. "Mr. Thompson," he sighed, "this is the third anonymous complaint this week." He looked embarrassed. "They're accusing you of using illegal pesticides now." I shook my head, laughing bitterly. "Let me guess, anonymous source?" He nodded. Same phrasing every time. While he tested my soil for the third time, I noticed something strange across the street. Karen had installed a row of concrete planters along her property line, new, perfectly aligned, all facing my yard. Decorative, but suspiciously identical. I saw Mike walking by later, stopping to check each one like a sentry inspecting traps. That's when I realized they weren't just planters. She was hiding something in them. Cameras? Recording devices? Or worse. By Thursday, the heat was unbearable, and so was the isolation. My plants were dying. Half the neighborhood avoided me. The hospital contract teetered on collapse. Maria texted updates in code, afraid Karen was monitoring her messages. "We're close," she wrote. "Just hold on." But Karen was unraveling faster than anyone anticipated. That afternoon, I decided to confront her directly. Enough was enough. I crossed the street, ignoring Mike's camera clicking like a vulture. Karen answered the door wearing a silk robe at 3 in the afternoon, holding a glass of wine. "Robert," she purred. "Come to surrender?" "Why are you doing this?" I asked quietly. "All I'm trying to do is move." Her smile vanished. "Because you embarrassed me," she snapped. "You made me look weak with that lawsuit about gardens. People said I couldn't even control one farmer. Me, the woman who built this community. You humiliated me." Her words spilled like acid. Then, with a sneer, she added, "Besides, you're violating the 90-day rule. You can't move." I stared at her, stunned. "That rule is illegal, Karen." She laughed softly. "Then sue me again, vegetable man. I've destroyed bigger threats than you." That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was sweltering, dark and silent, except for the chirping of insects. I sat on the porch and watched Mike pacing like a sentry. He didn't notice the unmarked car that rolled by slowly. Headlights off, camera pointed directly at him. Inside was Sergeant Rodriguez, Maria's husband, had been quietly building his own case, waiting for Karen to cross a legal line she couldn't escape. The pieces were finally aligning, though I couldn't see the full picture yet. We had evidence, we had witnesses, and Karen had no idea Shed already planted the seeds of her own downfall. But before the truth could bloom, she would try one last desperate move, one that would bring guns, sirens, and national headlines to our quiet little street. Friday morning broke with an eerie stillness, the kind that hums right before a storm. The air was hot, almost metallic, and even the cicadas were silent. I stood on my porch, staring at the wreck of what used to be Lisa's garden. The basil Shed planted, the one thing that had survived every disaster so far, was drooping, thirsty. I poured the last of my bottled water over it and whispered, "Not yet. Not today." That's when my phone buzzed. It was Maria. "Mike's been asking around about your son," her message read. "Karen knows he's a cop. She's planning something big. Be careful." My throat went dry. Nathan had said he was coming that weekend to help me pack. If Karen thought she could use him as leverage, she was more desperate than I imagined. By noon, the heat was unbearable. 98 degrees, no power, no water, no breeze. My shirt clung to my back as I tried to hand water the surviving plants with what little I had left. That's when I heard the familiar, grating sound of Karen's voice echo across the street. She wasn't alone this time. Mike was with her, along with 3 neighbors I recognized, people who once came to my farmer's market stand. Now, they followed her like disciples. "Robert Thompson," she announced loudly enough for the entire block to hear. "You are in violation of HOA safety regulations. A property without functioning utilities is uninhabitable." Her smirk was infuriating. "You have 24 hours to restore power or face immediate eviction proceedings." I looked at the 3 neighbors behind her. Tom Bradley couldn't even meet my eyes. His wife used to buy my vegetables for her dietary therapy. Id helped him build her a raised garden bed after her surgery. Now he just stood there, nodding obediently. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice level, "you've gone too far. This isn't about the HOA anymore. This is personal." She tilted her head, pretending innocence. "Personal? Robert, I'm only enforcing community standards. You're the one creating drama." That was it. The moment I broke. Weeks of harassment, years of grief, the loss of everything Id built, they collided in one breath. "You destroyed Lisa's garden," I shouted. My wife's dying wish was to keep growing healthy food for people who needed it. "You killed her dream because I embarrassed you." The street fell silent. My voice cracked, raw and shaking. "She planted that basil 2 weeks before she died. She could barely stand, but she did it anyway. And you," I pointed at her, trembling, "you've spent months trying to tear down everything she loved because you can't stand losing." For the first time, Karen looked rattled. Her perfect facade flickered, but only for a heartbeat. Then she sneered. "Save your sob story, Robert. Mental instability is another violation. Maybe you need therapy instead of tomatoes." Before I could respond, I noticed movement in the corner of my eye. Mariah's car parked discreetly across the street. Phone pointed right at us. She was filming. Thank God. Within hours, the video was everywhere. HOA president harasses widower over wife's dying wish. The headline spread across local pages like wildfire. Comments poured in by the thousands. "This woman's insane. Fire her. Protect that man." Karen Whitmore became a symbol of everything wrong with HOA abuse in America. By sundown, reporters were driving through the neighborhood. Local business owners were posting their support. "We buy from Robert Thompson," one sign read. "He grows food that heals." Even the coffee shop added my vegetables to their menu and tagged it number Justice for Robert. But not everyone was cheering. Inside her house, Karen was unraveling. Maria texted me that night. She's furious. She's calling everyone. Screaming about conspiracies. She's losing control. When Nathan arrived that evening, he parked a few houses away to avoid Mike's surveillance. I hadn't seen him in months, but when I opened the door and saw his face, all the strength it'd been faking dissolved. I hugged him hard, my body shaking. "It's okay, Dad," he whispered. "We'll fix this." He walked the property, jaw tightening as he saw the vandalized fence, the dying plants, the burned-out lights. "Mom would be proud of you," he said quietly. "You fought with patience, not anger." I nodded, swallowing hard. She always believed in doing the right thing, even when it hurts. We sat on the porch that night, 2 silhouettes framed by the soft glow of the moon. For a brief moment, I felt peace, like maybe the storm had finally passed. But then, across the street, a car engine started. Karen's. She pulled up to the curb and just watched us. No words, no gestures, just that smug, icy stare. My phone vibrated. A message from Maria. "Rodriguez just called. Karen's reporting an armed intruder at your house." Before I could reply, the silence shattered. Sirens, tires screeching, red and blue light exploded across the yard. 5 patrol cars skidded to a stop in front of my home. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. "Nathan," I said, voice trembling. "She called the cops on you." He raised his hands instinctively, calm but alert. "Dad, stay still. Don't move suddenly." A megaphone crackled. "Armed suspect. Come out with your hands up!" Karen's voice pierced through the chaos. "That's him! Has been stalking me! Has armed! Her performance was Oscar-worthy. Fake tears, trembling voice, the works. Hez dangerous. Nathan took a slow step forward, hands visible. I'm Officer Nathan Thompson, badge number 2847, Riverside Police Department, he said clearly. Off duty, visiting my father. My service weapon is holstered on my right side. The lead officer hesitated. Don't move, he barked. We got a report of an armed intruder. From across the street, Karen was waving her phone. Hez lying. Hez pretending to be a cop. The tension was suffocating. Every second felt like an hour. The officers' fingers hovered over their triggers. Then one of them, younger, frowned. Wait, Thompson? Are you the guy who got the commissioner's award last month? Another nodded. Yeah, the youth outreach officer. I read that report. Recognition flickered through the group, but before anyone could lower their weapons, a familiar voice cut through the air. Stand down! Sergeant Rodriguez stepped out of his unmarked car, badge flashing under the floodlights. That's Officer Thompson from Riverside PD, he barked. I know him personally. The relief was instant, like oxygen flooding back into the world. The lead officer lowered his weapon. Sergeant, what's going on here? Rodriguez's expression was stone. Anonymous caller claimed an armed intruder. Let me guess, it was Mrs. Whitmore? Karen stormed across the street, her composure cracking. Hez dangerous! They're all conspiring against me! I saw him with a gun! Rodriguez turned to Mike, who had stepped forward, puffed up with self-importance. I witnessed it too, he said, voice trembling but loud. He threatened her. Rodriguez's gaze hardened. Mike Stevens, right? Mike froze. Errant, you under a restraining order for stalking? The color drained from his face. That's different, he stammered. Karen hired me. It's a job! So you're admitting to being paid to stalk and harass residents? Rodriguez said coolly, good. That's conspiracy in violation of a restraining order. Thanks for confirming. Karen's bravado evaporated. You can't do this, she screamed. I'm the HOA president. I have authority. No, Rodriguez said. You have a problem. Nathan pulled out his phone, showing the officers Maria's videos, the HOA meeting, the threats, the utility sabotage, the vandalism. There's your evidence, he said. My father's been under siege for weeks. She's been abusing power, falsifying reports, and endangering lives. Karen looked around wildly as the crowd of neighbors gathered, phones recording every word. Her empire was collapsing right in front of her. Still, she tried one last desperate tactic. You'll regret this, all of you. I know people. Rodriguez's tone turned cold. Mrs. Whitmore, making a false police report is a felony. You endangered officers' lives tonight. You could have gotten someone killed. But Karen wasn't listening. Her voice rose into a hysterical shriek. Hez not real police. This is a setup. You're all jealous. Then she made her fatal mistake. In one unhinged motion, she lunged at Nathan. The slap cracked through the humid air like a gunshot. Gasps erupted around us. Every officer froze. Karen's chest was heaving, eyes wild, her perfect mask shattered. Rodriguez stepped forward, hand on his cuffs. Karen Whitmore, you're under arrest for assaulting a police officer, filing a false report, and criminal harassment. As he turned her around, she fought like a cornered animal. You can't arrest me, she screamed. I'm the president! But her designer heels betrayed her, slipping in the soft dirt of Lisa's ruined garden. She fell face first into the tomato patch, smearing red across her silk blouse. Mike tried to bolt, but tripped over one of Karen's decorative planters, the same ones Shed used to hide cameras. He landed hard, groaning as his fake badge fluttered to the ground. The street fell silent, except for the distant hum of crickets and the click of handcuffs. Neighbors stepped forward cautiously, phones raised, documenting the fall of the tyrant who'd ruled them for 8 years. Nathan knelt beside me, his hand on my shoulder. It's over, Dad. I looked at the garden, Lisa's garden, muddy, trampled, but somehow still alive. The basil had survived. It was bent, but unbroken. I smiled for the first time in weeks. "No, son," I said quietly. "It's just beginning." Because in that moment, I realized Karen's downfall was only the surface. Mariah's evidence hinted at something much bigger: money trails, political favors, and power stretching far beyond Willowbrook. And before this was over, we were going to uncover every root of her corruption. The night ended with flashing lights fading down the road, Karen and Mike in separate patrol cars, and me standing barefoot in the soil, the same way I did when Lisa was alive. The air smelled of earth, sweat, and justice. Somewhere above us, I like to think Lisa was smiling. The sound of Karen's screams still echoed in my ears long after the patrol cars disappeared down the street. The night air hung heavy with the smell of crushed tomatoes and wet soil. For the first time in months, Willowbrook was silent. No more threats, no more watching eyes, no more whispered rumors under porch lights. Just the sound of cicadas and the hum of a world returning to normal. Neighbors slowly emerged from their houses, faces pale and uncertain, like survivors stepping out after a storm. Tom Bradley was the first to speak. "Robert, we didn't know," he said quietly. His voice trembled with shame. "She said you were dangerous. We believed her." I nodded, too tired to be angry. "She fooled all of us, Tom." He glanced toward my ruined garden, then back at me. "If there's anything we can do." I gestured toward the overturned soil. "Help me rebuild. That's all I ask." By morning, word of Karen's arrest had spread across the county. Local news vans lined the street, reporters knocking on doors, neighbors giving interviews they never would have dared days earlier. HOA president arrested for fraud and harassment, the headlines read. The video of her fall, literally and figuratively, was everywhere. The sight of her sprawled in my garden became an instant meme, a cautionary image of arrogance undone. But what none of us realized was that Karen's corruption ran far deeper than fines and forged violations. Sergeant Rodriguez showed up at my door the next day, exhaustion etched into his face. "We've been investigating her for months," he said. "Your case gave us what we needed to tie everything together." He handed me his phone. On the screen was a photo, Karen shaking hands with a man in a suit. "Judge Harold Morrison," Rodriguez said. "Recognize the name?" I did. Had been the presiding judge on my garden lawsuit years ago, the one who'd ruled in my favor despite Karen's influence. Has been under federal investigation for real estate fraud, Rodriguez continued. Turns out, Karen wasn't just embezzling HOA money. She was helping a network manipulate property values across 3 counties, forcing homeowners out, flipping properties for profit, laundering the gains through shell companies. It was staggering. The woman who'd tormented me over garden rules had been part of a multi-million-dollar racket, and her arrest had set off a domino effect. The FBI got involved. They subpoenaed HOA financials, traced bank transfers, and uncovered a paper trail that stretched back nearly a decade. Her brother, supposedly just a local contractor, was revealed to be a front for Judge Morrison's laundering scheme. When the FBI agents arrived to take my statement, they thanked me. "Your documentation saved us months of work," one of them said. "You and Mrs. Rodriguez exposed a network we've been chasing for years." It was surreal hearing that. Just a week earlier, I'd been a man with a dying garden and a broken dream. Now, somehow, I'd helped dismantle an empire of corruption. The trials moved quickly. Mike Stevens, desperate to cut a deal, turned on Karen immediately. He confessed to everything: spying, vandalism, intimidation, and testified that Shed paid him cash to terrorize problem homeowners. His restraining order violations alone earned him 18 months in county jail. Karen wasn't so lucky. The day of her sentencing, the courthouse overflowed with reporters and former residents. She entered in an orange jumpsuit, still trying to maintain that air of superiority. But the moment the judge listed her charges, Embezzlement, fraud, harassment, conspiracy, tax evasion, the mask finally cracked. When the gavel fell, sentencing her to 4 years in federal prison and full restitution to every victim, the room erupted in quiet applause. Maria sat beside me, tears in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. I nodded. "No," I said softly. "You did it. You kept the records, the proof, the courage." She smiled. "We all did our part." After the trial, something extraordinary happened. Willowbrook changed. The fear that had hung over the neighborhood for years vanished almost overnight. At the first community meeting under new leadership, Maria was nominated HOA president by unanimous vote. She refused at first, saying she didn't want to repeat Karen's mistakes, but the residents insisted. "We trust you," Tom said simply, and so she accepted, promising transparency and fairness. Her first act as president was poetic justice. She overturned every one of Karen's ridiculous rules. The garden ban, the truck parking fines, even the 90-day move restriction. "From now on," Maria said, standing before a packed room, "this HOA will protect our community, not control it." The applause was thunderous. For the first time, Willowbrook truly felt like home. In the weeks that followed, neighbors came together like never before. People who hadn't spoken in years started helping each other plant new gardens. Kids drew chalk murals on sidewalks without fear of fines. Someone even started a best front yard garden contest. It was as if the whole neighborhood had been waiting for permission to breathe again. Tom Bradley showed up at my house one morning with a truck full of soil and seedlings. "You helped my wife once," he said. "Now it's my turn." We spent the entire day replanting Lisa's garden from scratch. Basil, tomatoes, corn, sunflowers. By evening, the soil was full of life again. "Your wife would be proud," Tom said. I looked at the glowing sunset and smiled. She already is. The hospital contract that had once seemed lost came back stronger than ever. Street Mary's administrators had followed the news and admired how Id handled it. "Anyone who can fight corruption with grace under fire is someone we want as a partner," their procurement director said over the phone. They extended the deal, 10 years instead of 5, and increased the purchase volume. With part of the settlement from the HOA's insurance, I expanded the farm into a community project. I hired some of the families Karen had forced out, giving them a chance to rebuild their lives. Every week, we donated produce to local food banks and hospitals in Lisa's name. On the front gate, I hung a simple wooden sign that read, "Lisa's Promise Farm, Growing Goodness." Nathan helped design a security system for the property: cameras, motion sensors, reinforced gates. "No more HOAs in your life, Dad," he said with a grin. Ever. We both laughed, but there was a shared understanding behind it. Some scars don't fade. They just remind you of what you survived. 8 months later, the garden flourished again. Rows of green stretched under the warm light of the new greenhouse. The basil plant Lisa had started, the same one that had survived everything, sat in the center, thriving. I spent hours there each morning, the smell of fresh leaves and damp soil filling the air. One afternoon, Nathan forwarded me an email that made me laugh out loud. It was a scanned letter from federal prison. Karen had written in messy handwriting on what looked like brown paper, "You haven't seen the last of me. I will reclaim what's mine." Nathan had forwarded it to the FBI agent who handled her case. The reply came within an hour. "Thanks. Well, add it to her parole review file." The agent had even added a thumbs up emoji. Sometimes justice really does have a sense of humor. A few months later, I drove back through Willowbrook for the first time since moving. What I saw nearly brought me to tears. Gardens bloomed in every yard. Children played on sidewalks once patrolled by Karen's enforcers. Maria waved from her porch, a cup of coffee in hand, the new HOA banner fluttering behind her. "Community through kindness." She walked over as I parked. "You should see what we've done," she said proudly. We turned her house into a community center, free workshops, gardening classes, even a small library. I chuckled. "That's poetic," she nodded. "Karma usually is." As I drove away, I took one last look in the rearview mirror. The street looked peaceful, alive, full of laughter and color, the way Lisa always wanted life to be. I thought about the journey, the fear, the rage, the fight, and how it all led to this moment of quiet redemption. When I returned to the farm, I stood before Lisa's basil plant and whispered, "We made it." The leaves shimmered in the sunlight as if nodding back. I could almost hear her voice in the breeze. "You fought the right way, Robert. With patience. With love." That night, I sat on the porch under the stars, writing the last letter I'd ever write to her. "My love, the battle is over. Karen's gone. The community you wanted to heal is finally whole again. The garden you started has grown beyond us. It feeds hundreds now. Your promise lives on in every seed we plant." I kept my word, Lisa. I kept growing. I folded the letter, placed it beside her photo, and watched the moonlight spill across the fields. Somewhere far away, in a prison courtyard, maybe Karen Whitmore was tending a garden as part of her work assignment. Maybe she was learning, for the first time, that growth doesn't come from control. It comes from care. Lisa used to say, "What you plant is what you harvest." And she was right. Karen planted fear and reaped destruction. We planted hope, and it grew. And if it ever happens to you, if someone tries to take what's good in your life, your peace, your dream, remember, you don't have to fight with fury. You fight with wisdom. You fight with patience. Because that's how good people win.